Her brothers sold her to the rival pack, unaware the Alpha King had dreamed of her forever. Elena Ashwood had learned early in life that she was not the kind of person her family celebrated. She was not the strongest, not the loudest, and not the one who sat at the head of the table during pack meetings. She was the one who refilled the coffee, cleared the plates, and slipped out of the room before anyone noticed she had been there at all. She told herself that was fine. She had her routines, her small garden behind the house, and the old books she kept stacked beside her bed. A quiet life was still a life. So when her 3 brothers called her into the main hall on a Tuesday evening, she assumed it was about chores, or errands, or some task they needed done before the weekend. She did not expect what Marcus said next. "We've arranged a marriage for you." He did not look up from the papers on the table. "To the Draven pack, you leave Friday." The room went very still. Elena looked at each of her brothers in turn. Marcus, the oldest, had his jaw set in that way he got when a decision had already been made, and he was simply informing you of it. Silas was staring at the floor. Rowan, the youngest of the 3, and the one she had always trusted most, was the only one who met her eyes. And what she saw in his gaze was not apology, it was relief. That was what stung the most. "You sold me," she said quietly. "It's not like that," Marcus said. "It's a peace arrangement, a bonding between families. It settles the border dispute and the debt," she said, to Damon. The silence confirmed it. She had known about the debt for months, though no one had told her directly. She had overheard enough late-night conversations, seen enough worried faces, pieced together enough numbers on half-hidden documents to understand that the Ashwood pack was in serious trouble. She had even offered, once, to help, to work with the pack accountant, to organize the records, to find some way through. Marcus had patted her on the shoulder and told her not to worry about things that were above her head. Now she understood what he had meant. He had already found his solution, and she was it. She could have fought. She could have screamed, or walked out, or refused. But she looked at Silas's pale face and thought about the pack members who lived in the houses along the ridge, the families who had nothing to do with her brother's poor decisions, and she made herself breathe. "Fine," she said. "I'll go." She turned and walked to her room before any of them could see that her hands were shaking. The Draven estate sat at the far end of a long private road lined with oak trees. Elena arrived on a gray Friday morning in a car driven by one of her brother's associates, with one suitcase and a very deliberate calmness that she had been practicing since Tuesday. She had expected something cold, concrete walls maybe, or iron gates, the kind of place that announced its power by making you feel small. Instead, the house was large and old, built from pale stone with wide windows that caught the light. There were flowers along the front path. Someone had planted lavender beside the steps. The woman who opened the door was not who Elena expected either. She was about Elena's age, sharp-eyed and direct, with the kind of posture that said she trusted very few people and had good reasons for that. "You're Elena Ashwood," the woman said. It was not a question. "I am. I'm Lyra. I run things here, in practical terms." She stepped back to let Elena in. "The Alpha King is waiting in the study. I should warn you, he doesn't say much when he's uncertain about something. Don't mistake the quiet for indifference." Elena almost said, "I know that feeling." Instead she nodded and followed Lyra down a hallway that smelled of cedar and old books. Cale Draven was standing by the window when she entered. He was younger than she had imagined, mid-30s perhaps, with dark eyes and an expression that was carefully neutral, in the way that took practice to achieve. He turned when she came in, and for just a moment, something moved across his face that she could not name. He recovered quickly. "Elena," he said, "thank you for coming." It was such a strange thing to say, given how she had come, that she almost laughed. She pressed her lips together instead. "Thank you for having me." He gestured to the chairs by the fireplace. They sat. Lyra brought tea and left without being asked. "I want to be honest with you," Cale said, wrapping his hands around his cup. "I agreed to this arrangement because my advisors thought it would help settle an old dispute. I was not thinking about you as a person when I agreed. I realize now that was wrong of me, and I'd like to start differently than that, if you're willing." Elena looked at him carefully. "What does starting differently look like?" "It looks like asking you what you need to feel comfortable here, and telling you that nothing is expected of you that you haven't agreed to. She had prepared herself for many things. She had not prepared herself for that. She took a slow sip of her tea. I need to know I can leave a room when I want to. I need my own space, and I'd like something useful to do. I don't do well with nothing to occupy me. He nodded. That's easy enough. A pause. Can I ask you something? You can ask. Were you treated well before you came here? She thought about the honest answer and the polite one. I was taken care of, she said finally. That's not quite the same thing. He seemed to understand that. He didn't push. The first week was careful and quiet. Cale gave her a room at the end of the east wing, with windows that looked out over the back field. She discovered the estate's library on her second day and spent most of her time there when she wasn't being introduced to pack members, which happened gradually and without pressure. People were cautious with her at first. She was an Ashwood, after all, and the old friction between the two families hadn't been forgotten. But Elena had always been good at making herself useful, without making herself a burden, and slowly that quality did what her name could not. She helped Lyra organize a supply schedule that had been causing headaches for months. She spent an afternoon with the pack's elder, a woman named Cora, cataloging old records that had never been properly sorted. She fixed a leak under the kitchen sink when the handyman was out, because she happened to notice it and happened to know how. You're not what I expected, Lyra told her one morning, with the bluntness that Elena was starting to appreciate. What did you expect? Honestly, someone either very frightened or very calculating. Lyra refilled her own coffee. You're neither. I've just learned to be practical, Elena said. Lyra looked at her steadily. That's what people say when they've had to be. Elena didn't argue with that. It was Cale who was harder to understand. He was not unkind. He checked in with her every day, sometimes briefly, sometimes for longer. He listened when she spoke and did not interrupt. He remembered small things she mentioned, that she preferred her tea without sugar, that she found large crowds tiring, that she had once wanted to study botany before she ran out of options. But sometimes she caught him watching her with an expression she couldn't read, not inappropriate, not unsettling, just searching, as though he were looking for something he almost recognized. One evening, after a packed dinner that had run later than planned, they were the last two left in the dining room. The candles had burned low. Elena was tired in a comfortable way, the kind that comes after a day that was actually full. Can I ask you something strange? Cale said. She looked up. Sure. The scar on your wrist, he said. How did you get it? She glanced down at it without thinking. It was small, a pale crescent below her left hand, faded now but permanent. Climbing a fence when I was 7, she said. Rusted wire. My mom was furious. A memory she rarely let herself touch. Her mother had been gone for a long time. Why? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I've dreamed about it. She stared at him. He looked almost embarrassed, which was not an expression she had associated with him. I know how that sounds. I've been trying to find the right way to tell you since you arrived, and there isn't a right way. So, he exhaled. For the past year I've had a recurring dream. A woman I didn't know. Specific things about her. A laugh, a way of tilting her head when she was thinking, a scar on her wrist. He met her eyes. It was you. I didn't know that until the moment you walked into my study. Elena was very still. The older wolves call it a fated pull, he continued. I always thought it was more legend than fact. I'm telling you because you deserve to know, and because I don't want there to be anything between us that isn't honest. You didn't come here by choice. The least I can do is give you the full truth. She looked at the candle on the table. The flame was very straight, barely moving. I used to have a feeling, she said slowly. Not a dream, just a feeling. That I was supposed to be somewhere other than where I was. She paused. I thought it was just restlessness. Neither of them said anything else for a while. They didn't need to. 2 weeks after that conversation, Rowan showed up. Elena saw him from the library window, standing at the edge of the property with Damon's associate. She recognized the man immediately. She had seen him at the house enough times to know that wherever he appeared, something unpleasant followed. She found Cale in his office within 10 minutes. I need to tell you something about my brothers, she said, and I need you to hear all of it before you decide what to do. She told him everything. The debt, the arrangement, the fact that the peace marriage was never truly about peace. And then she told him what she had pieced together that morning, that Rowan was still in contact with Damon, that Damon had been asking questions about Draven territory and pack movement, and that the original deal may have been designed to place her close enough to gather exactly that kind of information. Cale listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said, "Did you know any of this before you came here?" "No," she said. "I knew the marriage was about the debt. I didn't know about Damon's interest in your territory. And you're telling me this now." "You said you wanted honesty between us," she said. "I'm giving you that, even though it means telling you that my own family may have put you at risk." He studied her for a long moment. "Thank you," he said quietly. "I mean that." What followed was careful and handled without spectacle. Cale and Lyra traced Damon's interest back to a planned provocation, a scheme to spread false information about a Draven land grab, light enough to spark conflict, and allow Damon to profit from the chaos, while the two packs were distracted blaming each other. They had enough to stop it before it went further. When Elena's brothers were brought to account, she was the one who faced them. It happened in a room with no audience except Cale and Lyra. Marcus tried to justify it. Silas apologized in the way of someone apologizing for a minor inconvenience. Elena let them finish. Then she said, "I have spent my entire life being useful to this family. I kept the house. I stayed quiet. I asked for nothing. And when you needed a way out, you sold me to strangers without a single conversation." Marcus opened his mouth. "I'm not finished," she said calmly. "I'm not here to punish you. I'm here to tell you that this is the last time I will be used as a solution to a problem I didn't create. Whatever happens next with Damon is your responsibility to fix, not mine." The room was very quiet. Rowan, who had said nothing the whole time, looked at her with something she hadn't expected. Remorse. Real remorse, not the performed kind. "Elena," he started. "I know," she said, and she meant it. She did know. She also knew that knowing didn't fix anything, and that forgiveness, if it ever came, would take time she wasn't ready to give yet. Marcus and Silas cut ties with Damon to avoid pack censure. Rowan faced a formal consequence within pack law for his continued contact with him, fair, and handled without cruelty. The border dispute between Ashwood and Draven was renegotiated from the beginning, this time through honest representatives, without debt or people used as payment. On a warm evening in late September, Elena was in the garden she had started behind the east wing. She had put in lavender because she liked the way it looked against the stone wall, and rosemary because it was practical, and a small row of things she was growing simply because she wanted to. Cale came and sat on the stone bench nearby without being invited, which by now required no invitation. "Cora told me you've been helping her with the old family records," he said. "They were a mess," Elena said, without looking up from what she was doing. "Someone had filed half of them backwards. She said you're the most organized person she's met in 40 years. She's being generous." "She's not, actually. Cora doesn't do generous." He was quiet for a moment, in the comfortable way that had become familiar. "I've been thinking about the bonding ceremony. I want you to know, it doesn't have to happen on anyone's timeline but yours, or at all, if that's what you decide." Elena sat back on her heels and looked at him. The evening light was long and golden, and the garden smelled like rosemary and warm earth. "I know," she said. "That's part of why I want to." He looked at her with that expression she had learned to read now, steady and honest, without any performance in it. "Then we'll do it properly," he said, "when you're ready." She turned back to her garden and smiled to herself, small and private, the kind of smile that belongs to no one but the person wearing it. She had come here as someone's solution to a problem. She was leaving that version of herself behind, one day at a time, in a place she had chosen to stay, not because she had no other options, but because for the first time, she had looked around and decided that this was where she wanted to be. That, she thought, was the difference. And it made all the difference in the world.